There comes a moment in midlife when your body starts telling the truth your mind has been trying to manage. Not through logic, not through willpower, but through subtle nudges. Fatigue that won't resolve by pushing harder, emotions that surface without explanation, and a quiet grief for the version of you that carried it all for so long. What if none of this meant that something was wrong with you? What if it meant something was waking up? In today's episode, I'm joined by Carla Wainwright, a holistic wellness coach and midlife alchemist, for a conversation about reframing menopause, reclaiming feminine energy, and listening to the body as a source of wisdom rather than something to fix. We talk about nervous system healing, grief as a sacred part of becoming, and how midlife isn't an ending, it's an invitation into deeper radiance, embodiment, and self-trust. If you felt the pull to slow down, soften your grip, and meet this season of life with curiosity instead of resistance, this conversation is here to meet you exactly where you are. Now let's dive in. Have you ever noticed your skin reflects your stress? I used to struggle with mine, dry, dull, reactive, until I started pairing nervous system regulation with products that actually honor your body. That's why I love Milk and Butterflies. They handcraft every formula with 100% organic ingredients and powerful aromatherapy oils. They aren't just products for your skin, they're rituals that restore hydration, resilience, and calm even in the busiest seasons of our life. You can try them for yourself and feel the difference. Head to Milk and Butterflies and use my promo code Dr. Kelly for free shipping. That's DRKELLY for free shipping. Also, check out the link in the description for the podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. So honored to have Carla Wainwright on the podcast today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for what we're going to chat about. We're going to talk about midlife, nervous system regulation, a lot of things that come off of that. But before we dive into that, I would love to hear a little bit about your backstory. Like, how did you get invited into this space to help people with such profound work?
Yeah, so I like to frame my story as someone who has always been really connected to both the science and the sacred. And I really felt like I discovered that as a young person. I was always so connected to nature. I spent a ton of time outdoors and just really curious about small things in the natural world. And that also led me to, becoming a biologist, a wildlife biologist. And so, I had this love of the mysteries that I couldn't really explain, but also, of course, like the scientific method, which I was also really interested in. And that thread really wove through my life. I worked for many years as a wildlife biologist, but at the same time, I opened a yoga studio kind of as a side thing, which then became a full-time thing, and just really connecting to, all of these threads that I was always really interested in. And in my journey, I really began to move a little bit away from science as I was healing my own traumas in my life, and got very connected into the more esoteric teachings of Tantra, yoga, of course, Earth Priestess practices, and all of those things. And it was really very profound for me in my own journey of healing. And in turn, I was helping women through their own challenges and awakenings. But then as I started to move through my perimenopausal journey, I really recognized that I needed to get grounded back into the science, in addition to really welcoming the energies of the feminine and all of those pieces. And so I would say it's really like in the last 10 years of my life, I've come back kind of full circle to integrating both the science and the sacred together. And there's no accidents, of course, right? We go on this path, and often as we get older, some of the deeper pieces and meanings really come together. But I really see now that it is a really beautiful and profound fusion when we can take, deep innate wisdom that has been around, of course, for centuries and centuries, millennia, in fact, and we can marry that with some of the really profound insights that we have about the human body and lifestyle and all of those things. So that really has brought me to the place where I'm at today.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so fascinating how you can see the breadcrumbs. You don't know the full journey and you just kind of say yes to the next thing. And then you start to see how all the pieces are connected and that, like you said, nothing is a mistake or, it's all just part of that journey that you're on to serve, a specific part of the universe. And when you look back, can you see how the transformation of like maybe some of the struggles or challenges that you went through in the first part of your life has like really led you to where you are today in helping the people through that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that for many, many people who go into healing of some kind, it's often their own traumatic experiences that spur that. And so I would absolutely say that my own sexual trauma experiences really actually led me on this path and pulled me away, from that job that I had for so many years because the pull towards healing my own body, my own being, and then recognizing the impact that I could have as a result of my own journey with others. It really just felt like a calling, like I had to do this. So absolutely, my own experiences inform what I do today.
Yeah, it's so powerful. We always have that choice to let ourselves become the victim of what we experience or take that and really empower ourselves and others to heal from the inside out. And it's so profound that you have taken such tremendous challenges and now have transmuted them into what you have today. And going off of that, I would love to know, so many women that reach that kind of midlife and they think that like the best years are over. Like
Mhm.
they look at their body changing, they look at their life, maybe the kids are starting to become grown and more independent. And they kind of just look at their life and think that everything is on the decline from that point forward. Can you share your perspective and how maybe someone who's listening and in that point of their life can really reframe it
Yeah.
for more evolution expansion for themselves?
Oh, I love that evolution expansion. That's wonderful. That's like absolutely how I see it. So, you know, in our culture, midlife is absolutely for women anyway, framed as a decline. Not so much for men, but definitely for women. And it actually just lights a fire in me. It makes me so angry because, nothing could be further from the truth. I actually think that midlife and the portal that awaits, as you step over that threshold into menopause and beyond is really the time of life for a woman that is the most powerful. And I think, it's interesting. I think that, culture, and this has been, for hundreds and hundreds of years, that a woman is really it's so powerful at that time in her life. And so I think some of the mythology around that or the description of how it is a decline is done very purposely because it is a time when a woman really steps into her full power. And so a powerful woman is something that, many cultures, including our own, is quite afraid of. Right. And so this narrative that we have that is a decline, part of my mission in life is to really push back against that and frame it as a powerful rite of passage and stepping into this most powerful time. Now, the transition period that starts kind of for most women in their 40s through perimenopause, it's not an easy transition. It's really a metamorphosis. All kinds of things feel like they're breaking down, right? Our hormones are all over the place. We might not be sleeping well. We can't really manage stress in the way that we used to. And we do often feel like we're kind of falling apart. Like I've been there. I had moments in my 40s that were really, really hard. It's not to say that, my life doesn't have moments of being hard now, but now that I'm, on the other side, I've been postmenopausal for about a year. There's so much more lifting of a lot of those symptoms and much more clarity that's come through with that. But this metamorphosis, like if we use this beautiful image of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, into the cocoon, and literally dissolves, literally becomes goo. And we can feel like that in our midlife journey, that we're kind of falling apart. We're becoming goo. Like we just don't actually have the roadmap on how to navigate this. But then what lies on the other side is, of course, the beautiful butterfly that emerges. So, I really want to invite women to see this time as it is a portal. It is a metamorphosis. It isn't necessarily easy, although there's things that you can do to, of course, make it easier. But that what lies on the other side is incredibly powerful. So I often talk about this term of the second spring. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but it's a Taoist term. Comes from the Yellow Emperor, the Book of the Yellow Emperor, which was written in 2600 BC. So it's like almost 5,000 years old. It's old.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it talks about how a woman, when she's like seven times, I think it's seven times seven, like around like in her late 40s, she enters the second spring, which is the time when her sexual life force energy, instead of losing that through menstruation, or growing a baby, that gets channeled back into the heart, and this is the source of her incredible power, right?
Wow.
So this is the reframe that I really want to offer women, that the best is yet to come if we
Mhm.
embrace it.
Yeah, I love it. I always love these works from years ago where you see these same messages kind of come through, and like the empowerment of that, and realize that like this is not anything new. This is something that has been there, and we see these cycles of that, but sometimes it can often be hidden for, outside agendas, because it, like you're saying, they don't, there's a like disempowerment that happens because of what the potential is of people realizing their own inner power. So it's so, not for cliche, so incredibly powerful to realize that. And how is important is it for women to really embrace their feminine side? Because you see so much of society today really showcasing the masculine side of productivity, doing everything, getting it all done with a smile on our faces, and really disconnecting from ourselves and our essence. How important is it through that midlife to really embrace that feminine side and have practices to embody that?
I want to take a brief moment to pause from the episode to share something that I've noticed so many women struggle with, and maybe this resonates with you, that you do not feel safe to honor your own needs. You might be the one who learned how to be easy, capable, and reliable, and yet you're tired of overriding yourself. You're tired of explaining your no, you're tired of feeling guilty for wanting space, and tired of shrinking your truth to keep the peace. The thing that most people don't realize is that you can't actually protect your peace without a sense of inner safety. And without that safety, boundaries feel harsh, guilt feels unavoidable, and self-respect feels like something you're constantly working at instead of resting into. If you have that quiet, steady craving for self-respect, the kind that lives in your body, Self-Respect Reset was created for you. It's a guided, body-based experience designed to help you rebuild inner safety, trust yourself again, and honor your needs without guilt, explanation, or self-abandonment. If this speaks to you, you can find the link to join in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
Well, it's vital, and I do want to say I think it's actually vital for a woman in any phase in her life. I wish we taught our daughters or our young women and girls how to connect with feminine energy. And you're absolutely right. We live in a kind of hyper masculinized society, and there's often a distortion of the feminine. There's some beautiful expressions of the feminine, but feminine, women are not small men. But we actually try to fit into all of these boxes, because of the way society is structured, and because, honestly, we're still very much under a patriarchal mindset, which is beginning to, shift and change, but it's a slow and long process. So connecting with our feminine nature through sacred feminine practices, I think is key to a woman really thriving. So like I talk about what I term the sacred metabolism. So we have to take care of this vessel, like from a physical perspective, by taking care of metabolic health. But we also have our energy metabolism, and this is what weaves in this whole idea of connecting with our feminine energy. So recognizing that it's cyclical, recognizing that we we need the space to be wild, creative beings. We need to be able to access the deep intuition and the inner knowing that is contained within each and every one of us, but in large part has been forgotten or we don't know how to access it. And there are many beautiful practices from wisdom traditions, all over that help women connect with feminine energy. And so that is one of the things that I do, is to really support women to reclaim that part of our heritage. Like, even if those practices come from different, parts of the world that you may not have a lineage to, we all as women have this deep connection to feminine embodiment. And when we open up to this and we stop pushing and trying to fit into the small man box, then there's such a profound shift that happens for women, because so much stress, first of all, goes. And there's a capacity to really connect with her body and embodiment, like the inner landscape of her being, in such a deep and really meaningful way. And this is what also provides almost like that North Star as you're moving through the perimenopausal and menopausal journey. It's like, if I can connect with my feminine energy, then I really get clarity about who it is and who I want to be as I step into this next phase of my life.
Yeah, so powerful. It's so interesting as you say that, because one thing that was really eye-opening to me was learning about the mother wound and seeing how this then plays a role in generational cycles, and how you can live so much of your life not even realizing you're having some of these belief systems that are not serving you. But until you wake up to it, you're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't true. Like, and you literally live your days day in and day out of just believing this. And it's all in this effort to like keep you small, keep you silent, and quote, keep you safe, even though it's not actually safe in the long run. So it's fascinating how these just continue to play roles, but as you said, are evolving. And really, I think there is like a great awakening that is happening within so many of us. I think that's why there's a lot of turmoil happening in the world right now. But how do we, what does it look like? You talk about like anchoring into that feminine energy, and what does that look like for like a daily practice, or what are some things that women can do who are listening right now, or like, okay, what's the next step? How do I start to do that in my life?
Mm-hmm. So I one of the practices, and I mean, it's actually a kind of a life framework that I love sharing, is the importance of pleasure and connecting to pleasure. So how do we as women find pleasurable moments throughout our day that allow us, through those pleasurable moments, to actually really feel what's happening inside? I think, a lot of us are numb, and that could be from trauma, it could be from stress, it could be because we live in a modern world where there are a zillion things competing for our attention all the time. And what we tend to do when we're feeling like that is we tend to zone out even more, like, scrolling Instagram or whatever we're doing. And there's such a deficit of deep connection and pleasure in our lives. So we might get little tiny moments of it, but often we're not actually even paying attention. So I think there is a tremendous power in pleasure to help to rewire a woman's body so that she can begin to feel things at more subtler and subtler levels, which taps into her deep inner knowing. So my recommendation always is, a minimum of 5 pleasurable moments every day that you also take note of at the end of your day, right? And really be intentional about it. Like, how can you bring your senses alive? How can you make sure that, that you are really giving yourself the pause to notice? Because it's in the pause that the magic happens.
Yeah.
So, for those women who are listening, make it really simple, right? So often we equate pleasure to sex, and of course sex is enormously pleasurable, but it doesn't have to be sexual, right? It could be, like stroking your cat. It could be having a laugh with a friend. It could be putting your bare feet on the ground, on the grass in nature, any number of these things. But connecting with your pleasure capacity, and of course men experience pleasure too. It's not to say that they don't, but pleasure is really, it's like the spark that awakens our sexual life force energy, and it's so powerful. And women need to be very intentional about it, because if we look also at it from a scientific point of view, pleasure allows oxytocin to be created in the body. And oxytocin is the antidote to cortisol. Women consistently choose stress over pleasure. So we have to be intentional about it, right? And there's such a beautiful cascade of biochemical effects in the body when we choose pleasure. And so that's probably like my number one tip. There are many other practices you can do, but everybody knows, everybody can think of 5 things that they could do today that
Right.
would be pleasurable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a powerful question to even ask yourself, because I think so much of what women do, and I know I was caught in the cycle for a long time, is like, what should I do? What do I need to get done? It's those like things that are driving us, that are the external forces, versus like, what do I want to do? What is it? What is it that I desire? And it's like, you can go years without ever asking yourself, like, what is it that I want? What actually brings me pleasure? And because, like you said, you numb yourself for so long. And I love that example you gave of the butterfly. And the interesting thing is, like, when it comes out of the chrysalis, it has to be still because its wings are wet. So it has to give a moment to allow the wings to dry off before it can take off and fly. So it's like when you share that, taking a moment of just quiet, getting to know yourself again, it's just like that butterfly cycle that you were sharing before. So I think it's so beautiful just to tie that in and what you were sharing there. So, and I know you talk about nervous system regulation. It's something that I believe in, fully, of the power of it. Can you share your experience with regulating your nervous system? Was there a time that you felt very dysregulated, and kind of share that contrast between maybe when you felt dysregulated and when you were more intentional about regulation?
Well, I just felt dysregulated this morning, if I'm totally honest.
Yep. I know it's never any like, we're there, we reached the point.
I know there's no pinnacle that
No.
it all goes away. But I also have strategies now that I recognize it and I can,
Yep.
so again, like the pleasure piece is a beautiful antidote to that. But absolutely, I am, I would say in my 20s, I really struggled with extreme nervous system dysregulation. And yeah, my body was just always in high alert. And you just said earlier, what is it that I even want? Well, that's actually can be a very clear symptom of nervous system dysregulation. Like somebody could ask you, like, what is it that you want? And you don't actually have any clue. Like that question in and of itself can kind of shut things down. So, yes, I experienced, I have moments in my life, but if I go back to that time in my life, I was very much struggling, but didn't really have any context. The conversations that were happening, 30 years ago are not the conversations that we're having today. And I'm so grateful that I don't even think I knew what nervous system regulation was. That wasn't something that I was aware of. But in my journey and in my curiosity to just want to be different, like to want to have a different experience in my body, I was able to, through initially going to yoga class, like the very first yoga class that I went to, I was running super long distances. I was always pushing myself. And I went to this class and I thought we were just going to kind of roll around on the floor. Like I didn't really actually know what it was. And something happened in that class that I kind of like blew my mind open. I was like, I don't know if I've ever felt this way before. Like I had no idea what it was, but I wanted to feel that way again.
Yeah.
Right. And so for many people, they'll have an experience where it's just like the tiniest glimmer. And hopefully that becomes like this force that wants to draw you in to then, explore more and more and more. But I would
Yeah.
say in my life, given my experiences in my youth, I do have a tendency towards dysregulation. It's like it's a pattern, and fortunately now I'm able to recognize it. It's very imperfect, but I have strategies to be able to come back home to myself in ways that I didn't have when I was a much younger person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I so appreciate you said that you had a moment this morning, because that's realistic. I mean, I think sometimes it gets sold. I see things online. It's like, oh, you hit this point that you're regulated, and it's never the case. Like, there's
No.
always gonna be times that throw you off, but like what you shared, you have the tools to help bring you back home quicker. And if you didn't, when you didn't have those tools, you stay there longer, you go deeper. It's definitely a different experience. And I so appreciate you sharing the yoga experience too. I had the same experience with yoga. And when I started doing yoga, it was just like that crack, that like little bit of light of like, oh my gosh, this is a different way to live. live. And then that really like was the beginning of my journey as well, like exploring that and taking the breadcrumbs. So it's so powerful. And, you know, for anyone listening, take those opportunities, just say yes to something different. You never know the shift it's going to make in you, and open up a door that then leads you down the road of hopefully feeling like you are coming back home to yourself in that way. I know something that you talk about is reclaiming radiance. Can you talk about that? What does that mean to reclaim your radiance, and how does that look like in someone's life?
So, for me, radiance is this capacity to just really be connected with your body, to feel grounded, to feel open and receptive, and to just allow that to be experienced not only by yourself, but to be able, it's almost like you're a beacon and you broadcast that out. And so I believe that, radiance exists within every single being on the planet, but for so many of us, that's been covered by experiences of all kinds. And actually, some fear as well of like, what happens if I actually just allow myself to shine? And so, if we come back to this whole midlife piece, um, women, I think that we're hardwired to be people pleasers and diminish ourselves. And I think there's an evolutionary basis for that. However, it's not in our best interest often. But what happens, of course, as we move through this midlife transition is that desire to people please becomes less and less and less. I remember talking to a woman once, and I was in my late 40s, and I was like, yeah, this is really interesting. Like, I'm not really caring so much about what people think. She's like, wait till you hit 65. It's awesome. I was like, okay, that's
Yeah.
great. And so it's not that I don't think that radiance isn't achievable by anybody at any age, but there's something magical that happens for women. Again, this isn't a decline. This is like a real stepping into who you're becoming. And that radiance in many ways becomes accessible in ways that it wasn't before because of this capacity to actually really stand in your own power without needing the validation of others.
Yeah.
Now, I do again want to say it's like it's a choice. Women have to choose that. And it doesn't, for some women, it comes naturally and easily, but for most of us, it doesn't. So we have to be intentional about it and recognize that your biology, your being, your spirit is moving you in this direction if you say yes and you are an active participant in that transformation.
Absolutely. There's so much power in that willingness, and everybody has a different timeline. So it's like that openness to something different is only something that you can really cultivate or allow in your life. And so it's so powerful. But that experience of projecting your energy outward for your sense of worth versus bringing it back inward and realizing like it doesn't matter so much what the external world says. Like if I know my truth and I know who I am, that's really where your power lies. And it's such a powerful transition. I'm sure I have more to learn myself, but like I experienced that like for so much of my life was that people pleaser. And it really, I would say in the last like 5 years has made that transition. But I think I had to go through the pain to understand the power that it is taking your own power and energy back into your life. And when you make that transition of like really owning your radiance, and I know you said there's like fear involved with that because of it's just something that's maybe you have never done or hasn't been what you've known. Can you talk about maybe some of the grief that you experience or some of the turmoil or some of the other emotions that can come up with that journey? Because I think sometimes when we talk about like our evolution, it can seem very like everything is great, but I find that a lot of times things can be better within us, but the external world can sometimes fall apart in those cycles.
Yeah, of course. With any transition, there's grief because
Mhm.
we are losing things. We were gaining things, we're stepping into new things, but there is grief. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that um, in a culture that glorifies youth at all costs. A lot of women, I mean, I'm be honest, myself included, there are days I look in the mirror and it's like, oh, right, so there is it can be a very acute sense of letting go of a version of yourself that you, of course, were so intimately connected to for a really long period of time. And I think that it's really important for women to talk about that. I feel like we have a lot of shame in acknowledging, like, hey, you know what? I'm really actually struggling with getting older. I'm really struggling with what's happening with my body. I'm really struggling with all of these things. And normalizing those conversations and allowing women to, like, one of the greatest ways that women heal is to come together in community, right? It's so powerful. So I think that that is a really important piece in any transition, is to acknowledge the grief, because of course what we don't alchemize, what we don't process, what we don't actually give space for, it persists and it will be underneath the surface and it will dull your radiance,
Right.
right? So I think just being really, when I could tell I was getting towards the end of my menstruation, like I did a ceremony around that, because of course it had been a massive part of my
Mhm.
life as a woman,
Yeah.
and acknowledging the letting go of that. There was absolute sadness around that. There was
Yeah.
also some relief, if I'm honest too,
Mhm.
but
Right.
so just actually, as I said, ceremony, I also believe ceremony is a really important piece that is missing in a lot of our modern lives,
Mhm.
particularly if you aren't really affiliated with any kind of religion. And I think that, humans are ceremonial beings. We like ritual. We need ritual. It's really important. And so, having rituals that acknowledge the hard parts as well as the, expansive and lighter parts is really, really important.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And just giving space for both to exist. And that's why I love that you shared throughout this, is like the challenging parts, but also the exciting and expansive parts. And that's with every part of our journey, and allowing that, because there's so often we can just kind of, like you're saying, push away some of those lower vibration emotions that we feel, but we have to make space for that as well in order to fully feel some of those higher vibration energies. So I really grateful for you sharing that, like, duality and how that plays a role in what we experience. And for someone who is going through like midlife right now, and maybe they're perimenopausal, they're approaching that, they have maybe some of the symptoms, and I think that's another thing that's really like not expressed. We just hear hot flashes and that's it, and mood swings and that's it. Can you share with someone who's listening that is like maybe dreading that and has just heard some of the awful transitions? And I know you said that you've had a lot of clarity, but can you share that transition and some other things that you have really learned about yourself, and maybe some of the insights that aren't as broadly broadcast around menopause?
hmm So, yeah, again, there's just such a, um, well, we've kind of medicalized the whole thing, right? So,
Mhm.
so yes, and then there's this dread of the symptoms that are going to come through this transition, and the symptoms are real. Absolutely, our hormones are shifting and changing and declining, and that has, an effect on the body.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I do feel that much of it can be, we can't get rid of it completely, but we can mitigate a lot of that. And this is actually where the metabolic piece, the physical metabolic piece, really comes into play. So, it's said that in the United States, which I think, we can extrapolate to other countries as well, that only 8% of people are metabolically healthy. That's like staggering. So
Oh
that
my
means
gosh.
92% are not metabolically
Geez.
healthy. And women in perimenopause suffer particularly because of the decline in progesterone, which means that we don't have that buffer effect for cortisol, the
Mhm.
decline in estrogen, or estrogen moving all over the place. We become more insulin resistant, which means that our blood sugars fluctuate more. We experience more cortisol because we don't have those buffering effects. And, a lot of women will say, like, oh, that didn't used to bother me, and now this particular thing just makes me fall apart. So it is a really challenging time. And the fact that we're not metabolically healthy, I think, really compounds the challenge of moving through this phase in life. So what I, support women to do, and really encourage women to think about, is what are the lifestyle changes that I can make so that I
Mhm.
can support a healthy metabolism, a healthy vessel, so
Mhm.
that I can move through this phase and really hold on to that radiance.
Mhm.
So, this our food system is a nightmare. The
Mhm.
processed food, all of that. Um, we eat too many hours in the day. We need to shorten that. I am a certified Fast Like a Girl coach, so I do follow those principles as well, which can be really profound for women at this time in their lives. But I really think like attending to the vessel and supporting metabolic health is one of the most important things that you can do, in addition to not forgetting the spirit and the feminine, right? That's why I think they're both so important. They need to go hand in hand. But yeah, the physical piece becomes the things that we could ignore earlier in our life become
Mhm.
harder and harder to ignore
Yeah.
once we kind of move into this transition time.
I appreciate your proactive approach and just giving that insight, because I think sometimes we think of like menopause, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And, it's often like, oh, just take a back seat and you're just going to see that occur. But when you realize like, oh, there's things that I can do to help mitigate some of those symptoms and have a better experience, I think that's really empowering for women. It's like when you are proactive and you're taking action to do what you can within your power. And of course, there are things that are not in your control. Like it just allows you to feel like you're part of the process versus like it's just happening to me. So I so appreciate your approach and the sharing that insight. Because again, for anyone who's approaching that, like that just gives more it just gives it a better understanding of what are some of the things to consider as you're moving through that. And so for anyone who wanted to connect with you, learn more about how they can move through midlife with more grace and embrace their radiance, how can they find you?
So the best way to find me is to go to vibrancyreset.com. And there, I actually have a free guide with 5 steps that women can take that are easy, doable, that kind of cover all the things that we were talking about today. And then you can also reach out to me there. But vibrancyreset.com is the best place.
Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, definitely check out everything Carla has to offer. And again, I'm so grateful for everything you shared. I know it's really going to make a big impact on anyone who's going through midlife, approaching midlife, or just wanting to do it with a more smooth and graceful process. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. And again, for anyone listening, if you found benefit in this and you know someone who would also benefit from this, share this episode and allow these messages to really be expanded out to anyone who could really be helped by this. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with me today. If something in this episode stirred your truth, reminded you of your worth, or helped you see your patterns with more compassion, you're already rewiring your life. Remember, you don't have to earn your place, overgive to be valued, or shrink to keep the peace. You get to honor your voice, you get to protect your energy, you get to live aligned with who you really are. If you're ready to go deeper, explore more tools, or join a community of women walking this same path, head over to drkellykessler.com. Everything you need to continue this journey is waiting for you. Until next time, take a deep breath, trust yourself, and keep choosing the version of you who feels like home.